deal with the one item that's on the agenda. And then we'll move back to the regular, deal with regular business, and then deal with the other items that don't require patchwork.
Oh, so we are still gonna go into close and
Yeah, we're just gonna
everybody
do
else
the, we're
with
just gonna
the
do the
top.
TUP first,
Oh,
so that we don't have to take everyone out.
Oh, I see.
Allison, go with the flow, it's gonna work, trust me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, everybody's here except Raj. We'll wait for him. Okay, I'd like to call this council meeting to order. Thank you, participants from the public. Nice to see you all. And we'll start with the approval of the agenda. There is a request that we move 9.1 to 7.2 before we move to that closed meeting. Does anybody have an issue with that? Okay, we'll call it by resolution then. We'll just do that. Thank you. And anything else that anybody's got an issue with?
I just have some on-table items.
Yes.
They were circulated by
Here,
email
yeah.
earlier today.
Yeah.
Just regarding item 9.1, which is the TUP and DVP for Melmore. There was 10 letters, or 11 letters, pardon me.
Okay, got it. 10 and 11, yes, thank you.
we have a title in here.
Sorry,
Letter
what's
of
that?
support. It's March. Not
Oh,
March.
no, that's the 11th one.
Oh, I see. It doesn't go anywhere, so.
I had asked just for a little spot for Heritage Week.
Oh, that's right. So that under new business, Councillor Nicholson had requested 5-minute item for upcoming Heritage Week. So I
All
guess-
right, what do you like to put that in?
I
Just
can
a-
suggest that go under, just after 12.5
Yeah, 12.6.
or
12.6, Heritage Week.
Yeah. Put it in 12.6 under new business. All right, somebody move that as amended, thank you.
I
Sue.
move the agenda as amended.
Okay, second, thank you, Michael, and all in favor, thank you, it's unanimous. And we'll move on to public comments. Do you have anybody on the talkers list?
We do have a few. We
Oh,
have five in total. First is Greg Bosworth, regarding temporary use permit for Evergreen.
I'll be very quick. To do. Thank you for letting me be a part of democracy. I just want to speak very briefly, and I don't know how many of you saw the email that I had sent, but to the points that I'm speaking as opposed to the temporary use permit for a number of reasons. Safety being likely the first. I also want to preface by saying that, and as I said in my email, that I've got 2 grandchildren in this program, and I understand the value of this program. I understand the work it takes to be a homeschooling parent, and I see in my grandchildren the value of that. So I want to preface my comments by, I get what they're doing, and I'm supportive of their program. However, I believe that there's a number of concerns around safety, traffic, and parking that could arise. I know that there's a mitigation plan in place, but my belief and feeling is that if it's not cars, vehicles, it's pedestrians, both of which in that neighborhood, with that freshly paved neighborhood, but still very dark, with cars that back out of driveways and parking that creates people having to go around cars could create an issue, safety issue. So there's the safety issue that is a concern of mine. The other one is the lack of temporary. It's a temporary use permit, and in the reading that I did, it says that it's for seasonal or short term, and I don't think 3 years qualifies as short term. And I think that given that the proponents are offering to purchase the property and not lease the property, it means there needs to be long-term guarantees of this being an entity. And so when it's labeled a temporary use permit, I have some issues with that. And the other one is that it's not to negatively impact, as I understand, the environment or the character of the neighborhood. And I just cannot see how it would not affect the character of the neighborhood with both the traffic, pedestrian traffic, or vehicle traffic, with the parking, and with, I don't know whether noise is the right word, but there's going to be a lot more activity than is currently there. There's a playground plan, I understand, and there's just going to be more activity, more people, and more noise. And the character of the neighborhood is a sedate, quiet, residential neighborhood. I think I have other points, but I didn't prepare anything. And I think I've taken up as much of your time and the room's time as necessary. So thank you for allowing me to come and say it.
Alan, no,
Sogstad.
Sogstad, regarding temporary permanent.
Come right up.
Anyway, I'm Alan Sogstad. I run Island Discovery. I have for 17 years. I started it for my own two girls when we moved to Bowen Island and met some like-minded people here. We operated out of Collins Hall for about 7 years, and then we got a little bigger and we couldn't operate there anymore, so we rented a home from Wolfgang Dunce out by the golf course. We've been there about 10 years. In the 10 years, we've never had a complaint. We've never had a problem with council. We like that. We like the location. Our program is it's a homeschooling program, so we like to host classes in home, in somewhere cozy, somewhere more intimate. Our families and us, we don't like big institutional settings, so that's how we've done it. So we are forced to leave our location at the end of this year, so we need a new place to be for our program. And we have about 50 students in our program, about 35 families or so. So and this is, like I said, been 17 years, so it's a pretty well-established program on Bowen. We looked at land. We had Wolfgang Dunce offering us to donate land for our use. We had Candy Hull at the Cape offer us land for use. But the cost to build and all of that is kind of ridiculous, not really feasible. So we kind of left it, but where can we go? Where can we go? So we've kind of stuck with, can we rent somewhere in a neighborhood that will work? Evergreen Hall came up. We knew it was on the market. It's been on the market for about 1.5 years. I feel kind of badly for Maureen, who owns Evergreen Hall, because I think the big reason it hasn't sold is because it's a hall. And everybody who goes and looks at it goes, this isn't really a family home, it's more a hall. It's kind of big. And then, people come along like us, and we see the use of it a little bit like a hall. But it's in a residential neighborhood, and so it's kind of a catch-22. But the heritage use of the hall, the building is a hall. Anyway, we are very excited about the idea of being there. We think it's a perfect space for us. It's not too big, it's not too small. Right now, with the amount of traffic of our families going all the way out to the golf course, it's a big hindrance. It would be a huge decrease in our carbon footprint to be at Evergreen Hall. I think we counted at least 1/3 of our families could walk. Ones that live at Collins Farm and Miller's Landing and Deep Bay and all over Kate's Hill even. And so for families, they're thrilled by that. Even transit, it's easy, very easy to take transit to the Cove and walk across the causeway. It's like a 5-minute walk. And we feel like the impact of our use is a lot less than others, right? We only operate in totality less than 9 months of the year. We're never there after 3 o'clock. We're never there in the evenings. Nobody would live on site. It would be empty all summer long, which is the time that most people are outdoors. We wouldn't be able to host parties or big events there because it's too small. We usually do that at Kate's Hill Chapel when we have our whole community together. We would be getting we would never have more than 30 people on site. So we went door to door just to be proactive. We went door to door to ask everybody how they felt, and well, this is our plan, and we gave a letter, and you have a copy of that letter. Most people were very supportive. just a few concerned people. But we want to hear the concerns, because we actually don't want to be there unless we can know that we're not going to be of a huge impact on neighbors, right? We want to be good neighbors. We don't want to destroy neighborhoods. But anyway, I really see it as 4 things that people react when they hear about us coming, right? First is, oh my God, there's going to be a big school in Deep Bay, right? And that's very alarming. But I just want to point out that on our busiest days, we only have maybe less than 30 people on site, which is like 1 class at Bix. On our 2 quiet days, we have more like 15 people on site. So it's really not that big. Another concern is traffic. But with our traffic mitigation plan, I see us only having 5 to 6 cars on the busy days, 2 to 3 cars on the 2 quieter days. And I think those cars would come in around between 8 and 9. They would leave between 3 and 4. There wouldn't be back and forth traffic, and everybody else would walk from outside Deep Bay. So I just really think that's reasonable. Parking too, that could, I understand, parking, there is only room on site for 6, 7, 8 cars. We wouldn't use more than that. We don't think the street parking is appropriate. We don't think it's appropriate to put in more parking. I like the idea of just saying it's limited to 5 or 6 cars, and we make it a strict policy with our parents that they can't drop off, they can't park. There's not a lot of places to turn around, or Deep Bay is very tight that way. So like we've talked to our whole parent community, and they're excited about the idea of using transit and walking, and I just hope people will trust us with that. I really think it'll work. And hey, come bring the RCMP out and ticket us if we're not, but I really don't think you're going to need to. The other one is noise, and it's true. On the busy days, we'll have 20 to 25 kids there, 3 days a week. They'll make some noise playing, but it's happy child noise, and it's in the middle of the day, an hour at lunch, 15 minutes at recess, never after school, never in the evenings, never on the weekends, and to me, I don't think that's, but if council thinks that's a concern, then that's a concern, but those are the concerns we've heard. I think our plan is a reasonable one, and I hope the council will consider all of that and help us out. Thank you.
All right, thank
Can
you
we
all.
ask a question?
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, you're not on the line.
No,
What's the age range of the students?
we go from kindergarten, so there's 5-year-olds, and we go right up to grade 12. We only have 1 grade 11 right now, and we have no grade 10s, no grade 12s. We have about 6 kids that are grade 8 and 9. All right, thank you.
That is awesome. Thanks, Mom.
Charmaine, couple pictures?
Hi. In my own words, I'm just going to repeat a few things that Al said. Jenny Redcup, who's one of the parents and a friend, reminded me this afternoon when I was feeling a little bit stressed about what I heard was opposition to our plan, that this is what we do as Bowen Islanders. We get really passionate, we get excited, and we want to have a say about what's happening in our backyards. And I really get that. I respect that about our island, because I've never ever lived in a place where people are so passionate about their space, and it's amazing. I understand that there were some letters written in opposition about the school moving to Evergreen Hall, and I want to assure you that as a group, as a whole, the IDLC parents are a really reasonable bunch of people. And we're a sensitive group of people, and we chose to homeschool our kids for an intentional purpose. And I converted that thought by saying that we do most things in an intentional and considerate way. Our wish is to be not only given the temporary use permit, but to be accepted wholeheartedly into the neighborhood. We don't want to make enemies. We will do anything we can to alleviate the residents of Deep Bay of their concerns. 2 of the concerns that have been brought to our attention are traffic, parking, both of those are the same, and noise. We've made, in our moving committee, a new transportation policy, which means that parents will have to drop off their children at the Catholic Church, and groups of children or groups of adults with children will have to walk to Evergreen Hall. That should take 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or We can take the bus to the library and walk across the lagoon from there, and same distance, same length of time. I think that those ideas of walking in the morning are great for families to understand that their kids are going to have a little fresh air and a little exercise, and also gain a little independence along the way, walking with their cohorts to school. As for noise, recess lasts approximately 15 to 30 minutes in the mornings. We also have an opportunity to use Criffin Park, to use Pebbly Beach, to use Mother's Beach as alternatives. Not to say that we're going to be not on site every day, of course we are, but we have other options, which is nice, that we can walk to those other places to explore the forests and the ocean. Of course, an hour at lunchtime is also when you'll hear kids, you'll hear laughter and games, and there's always 2 parents on the playground supervising every day. I was one of those parents today, making sure that all was calm, play was respectful, and the property is respected as well. One of the neighbors I talked to in Deep Bay, one of the neighbors adjacent to Evergreen Hall, thought that children playing in Deep Bay would bring a liveliness and a happiness into Deep Bay. And I understand it is really peaceful for the neighbors, but I also don't think that children's laughter is a bad thing. We want to invite anyone that would like to come to Evergreen Hall. Maureen has graciously offered the space so that we can have a sort of a town hall open discussion meeting with the neighbors, so we can talk together about what other concerns there is, because we've already dealt with the traffic and the noise, and we want, like I said, we want to be good neighbors. We want to deal with anything that comes up. And I really appreciate that Greg has mentioned the safety of children walking while cars are backing out of driveways. That's not something that I thought about, and that's something that we need to address in our commuting policy. So we want to work together with the neighbors, we want to be good neighbors, and we want to enjoy a long and beautiful relationship with the neighbors in Deep Bay, if all goes to plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Quick question.
Yes.
So you have kids right now in the school?
I have one child who's in grade 4, and had another one that went there from K through 5, who's now in grade 9 and I guess.
So with this location change, how are you taking the kids now, and do you see that changing with this location?
Absolutely. I live on Collins Farm. I have to commute twice a week. We have a really busy carpool scenario, so twice a week I drive on, no, sorry, not twice a week. It depends. On a good week, it would be once or not at all because of the carpool situation. On a bad week, I drive twice a week to Cowan to drop my child at school. And we usually, I have a full car, I have a minivan, so today I had 6 in my car.
So you're going around picking up kids in the car?
Yeah.
And this
Usually we meet at the Bix stop up by the field
Yeah.
and collect a whole bunch of kids there and drive out, or we meet at the Catholic Church, depending on the day.
And this new location? that
We would
change?
walk or even bicycle.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, it is a quick question. Thank you. One of the concerns that I've seen in the letters is about assembly use, and maybe Alan mentioned that, I'm not sure. But help me understand, so what about assembly? Like, the worry would be a whole lot of people would need to arrive for assembly.
Can you rephrase that? I didn't quite understand the question.
One of the concerns that's been raised is that part of what you would have would be something called assembly, and I'm not quite sure what that means.
I don't know either.
Can I
I
I
haven't
think
read
Alan
the-
said they have big events at,
You have your big
Chapel.
events at other places.
Yeah.
But the zoning is for assembly, so is that because a classroom is considered assembly? It's a question I had for the report. I was gonna ask this.
let's wait till he gives his
Okay,
report.
sure.
Okay.
Here's a quick answer, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hold on for a quick answer.
Satjeet, regarding the 720 Gardner Lane.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
I just want to take the opportunity to thank you guys again for the site visit and hopefully learning a bit more about what we're up to and what we hope to get up to. As you know, we're not some big developer and just simply upsold the property and just sell it for a profit and kind of be done with it. We truly do hope to continue to invest on Bowen and build something that we feel is really special and unique to the island. And it's also in alignment with the ethos of Bowen, which is the natural environment and health and wellness and sustainable for the future. So with that, we hope we've submitted a plan. We feel we've submitted a plan that balances a lot of the inherent challenges that exist anytime really any development happens. But ultimately, it's in your hands. So thanks again, and hope to talk to you again.
Hold on a second.
Thanks for the walkthrough. It was
Yeah.
great seeing that. It was nice sort of getting on and the upper properties and all that. Quick question for you, because I got the impression you're gonna maintain that one chunk of land, do some more, bed and breakfast or yoga space and that. But you right now have no intention of parceling out the property?
No.
No, okay. So if we were to go ahead and upzone this as one parcel, that would still satisfy your needs as far as moving forward with it. And what I'm saying is, so putting the zoning on the entire property versus just one chunk of it, and then leaving other chunks that could potentially be sold off later on.
I see.
Yeah.
Haven't thought about that, so.
But it would not negatively implicate what you're doing right now, basically, what you want to do right now.
Potentially no.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Seth.
Last but not least, Dean McCarthy regarding Evergreen Hall.
I have nothing to add to, actually, one thing. Traffic and parking would be my concerns with the school. I was working in the garden today and watching the kids all coming home from school, and they walk, bike, skateboard, some of them on their stomachs down the middle of the road, around a blind corner. And most of the people that live in the neighborhood at that time of day, they're watching for those children. All the driveways, and every place has a driveway, everybody's backing out. There's only one circular driveway. A map I saw has the daycare marked on the corner. They don't have the daycare across the street from me. There's a second daycare as you come around that first, second, 1, 2, 3 corners altogether. The second corner, there's another daycare with people dropping kids off and picking them up. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this 3 years for a temporary use. They're going to buy that and do renovations, and in 3 years you're going to tell them, sorry, it didn't work out. And well, he said, trust us. I do trust them. Everything they say that they're going to do, I believe that's what they plan on doing. But once you open a door, all sorts of things can happen. It's a Pandora's box. Their children can graduate from high school, move on, and the people that come up behind them say, well, we can do this and we can do this. All sorts of possibilities that we aren't even thinking of now. So they say, trust us. I do trust them. All their mitigations are very reasonable. And I guess the third thing is 3 years for temporary use. There should be something other than that, like that they could lease it for a couple of months or something like that just to try it out. But 3 years is way too long for just a trial. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that it? All right, thank you. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they're not seeing happen? Need some clarification. Okay, that's great.
I'll move the agenda.
All right. Second. Wow. All in favor? Thank you, Michael. Michael, were you happy with that?
Sorry, big pardon. Yeah, absolutely, sorry.
All right, so that'll take us right into delegations, of which we have none today. Business of rights for the minutes, and back down to bylaws. So 6.1, Municipal and Regional District Tax Program Application. Emma.
Hello.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. And I apologize, I was a bit late getting the presentation to Hope, so it's my fault. I'm going to talk about the Municipal and Regional District Tax Application process, which includes bylaw that I'm bringing to council for consideration tonight. A little background, the Municipal and Regional District Tax Program, better known as MRDT program, is jointly administered by several provincial organizations, Destination BC, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture. It is a sales tax on short-term accommodations up to 3% within a given jurisdiction. And the tax revenue that comes out of this program is categorized into two categories. The first comes from traditional accommodations such as hotels and inns, and it is called general revenue. The second newer category are accommodations where the sales transaction takes place or is facilitated within an online marketplace such as Airbnb and Booking.com. This one is known as Online Accommodation Platform Revenue, or better known as OAP revenue. And the reason we're making this distinction is because the MRDT program allows both categories of revenue to fund tourism initiatives, namely marketing programs and projects related to tourism. But the OAP revenue can also fund affordable housing initiatives. And this is a direct response to the rising concern around online accommodation providers having a negative impact on long-term housing affordability. So just to be clear, OAP revenue can fund affordable housing. The general revenue can only go towards tourism. And the MRTT program first came up in the 2019 Island Plan. It was part of Strategic Priority A1 to help fund affordable housing initiatives. It was also brought up in the short-term rental policy that was adopted by Council in November to help fund both tourism and affordable housing, and that was in response to a lot of concerns we got from the community during the engagement when we developed that policy. On November 25th, Council passed a resolution directing staff to begin the application process, and that's what brings us here tonight. The application itself involves several things. We need to specify the designated recipient and accommodation area. In our case, this is Bowen Island Municipality. And when do we want this tax to start, and how much do we want the tax rate to be? So in this application, we have a start date of January 1st, 2021, just to be clean to start off with the new year. And we've also requested the maximum tax rate of 3%. Oh, I don't know, that's all different. But the other main components of the application is a 5-year strategic business plan, and that's to cover what the municipality wants to see for tourism and affordable housing within the municipality. We also need to provide evidence of support from the Islands Trust, since we're under their governance, and the municipality needs to pass a bylaw actually requesting that the province levy this tax on their behalf, on our behalf. And then the last major component is stakeholder consultation, namely the major accommodation providers on this island, and there are specific criteria. When I say large accommodation providers, they have to have more than 4 rooms and not advertise exclusively online. We have a list from the province. There's 6 of them on the island, so it's a fairly small stakeholder list. But we also have an obligation to provide a wider consultation to the general tourism industry. The timeline for the application process right now, this is tentative, to make that January 1st, 2021 effective date, is to complete that business plan and get the Islands Trust support and pass the bylaw all in February. So this is really contingent upon council actually giving the bylaw first reading tonight and bringing it back to the next council meeting for adoption. And during this time, we will start engaging the accommodation providers. We will have an information session at the end of February and have Destination BC review the application beginning of March before we submit. And this is an important detail of the application. As I mentioned before, there are the 2 types of MRDT revenue. And right now, as as directed in the short-term rental policy, the revenue was meant to be split 50-50 between both tourism and affordable housing initiatives. And that is fine because on Bowen Island, the bulk of MRDT revenue is expected to come from OAP, meaning most of the short-term accommodations take place online. However, in the unlikely situation that, say, several hotels pop up and a lot of traditional type of short-term accommodation units overtake the OAP revenue, they make up more than 50%. As I mentioned before, only OAP can go towards affordable housing, so therefore the split will no longer be 50-50. The entirety of the general revenue, if it was more than 50-50, for example, 65%, the entire 65% of MRDT would then go to tourism, and the remaining OAP, so less, whatever the amount less than 50% would then go to affordable housing. So, sounds complicated, it is a little bit, but it's very unlikely for the foreseeable future OAP revenue will be more than 50%.
Sorry, and I just blanked out for a second there. So we're probably mostly gonna have OAP coming in, obviously. Can all, did you say only 50% can go to affordable housing, or can all of that go to?
Excuse me, guys? It's hard to concentrate, it's complicated.
All of the OAP revenue can go towards affordable
Okay,
housing.
thanks.
Yeah.
Can any, some of it go to tourism?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you just said it could only go to affordable housing.
No, the other way around. Only OAP can be spent on affordable housing, but OAP can be spent on affordable or tourism.
But some of the
There is
general
that.
revenue can also go to affordable housing, I thought you said.
No, general revenue can only go towards tourism. Is that clear?
Yeah, Crystal.
Okay. Like I said again, it's very unlikely that will happen. I think the 50-50 split will be how it will turn out. Service agreements are not required as part of this application, but strongly advised. And that's an agreement between the municipality and the service provider. In our case, that would be Tourism, Bowen, and Birch. It will establish who the service provider is that will be getting the MRT funding, how much of it they will be getting, and that funny slip that we're talking about, it will have that in black and white saying exactly this is how that split will work. It will also detail the type of activities that the MRDT is allowed to be spent on. So these agreements do not need to be, like I said, part of the application, but the province strongly advises it and staff also recommends. We already have a service agreement in place with Tourism Bowen, so staff will be bringing forward some proposed amendments for that and also consider a service agreement with Birch.
Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
So just on that, so the affordable housing component, that would not be going into a pot that Birch would then apply to, it will go directly to Birch, is that what you're saying, or?
In this case, it can go into the Affordable Housing Reserve.
Reserve, that's where, okay,
And
and then they can
But that's-
apply to that reserve for funding through us.
If we need to specify in the application what type of affordable housing initiatives we would be spending the money on.
Right.
So if what Birch wants to use the money, the funds for match with what we applied for, then they can
apply
They
for
can apply
that
for that,
funding.
but it has to match
Yeah, okay.
what
We're
we've
not-
applied for.
Okay, I'm just thinking down the road, there might be other affordable housing providers coming on island, so just want to have that flexibility, thanks.
Just for clarification on that, so the stuff that comes out of that side of the program isn't necessarily going straight to Birch, right? That's the indication I got.
No, Raj asked about this and I got clarification from the program that we can put it into an affordable housing reserve.
Okay.
It just needs to go towards what we say.
Yeah,
it will
yeah, no, that's
in
fine.
the application, but we don't need to specify the organization.
Giving it,
I think another clarification, Emma, if I'm not mistaken, is the funding that will go to Tourism Bowen.
Yes.
It has to be in addition to the 20, that won't replace the 20 that we provide them. We have to continue providing that level of funding. So this would be funding on top of that.
Okay, thanks.
Good point. So the next steps in this application process would be to complete that business plan. It is partially done right now, expect to be finished this week, and to bring that back to council for review along with adoption of the bylaw at the next council meeting, and also to commence stakeholder engagement. So the recommendation from staff is to give the bylaw first reading.
So,
Just a clarification question here first. You said on top of the 20% we already provided, on top of the 20,000?
20,000.
Thank you. And do we have a core service agreement with them? Because or is it a renewal thing? Because I'm just concerned that this is locking us into 20,000 for them plus over many years.
We do have, actually, we just moved it over to a core funding agreement last year, or this current year. It used, but we did have a provision built into the budget.
Two questions. One is, are we obliged to spend everything that comes in a particular year? If we have X amount of dollars and we split it evenly, can we hold some back in reserve, or are we obliged to distribute the funds?
I actually don't have the answer to that, and it was one of my questions for them. So I will follow up.
Okay. And then my second question had to do with clause 4.1, which deals with the application here. And it says to be applied to tourism, marketing, and so on. Is there a reason why you didn't specify a 50-50 split in the bylaw itself?
I was given a template for the bylaw, and I was told it wasn't necessary to put in the split, but I don't know if that means I think we could if we wanted to.
Personally, I'd be more comfortable if it were stated in the bylaw. The scenario where we have multiple hotels down the road, if that ever happens, we can revise the bylaw. But in the short run, if it was explicit and said we're anticipating 50-50 for tourism and for housing, I would have a greater degree of comfort with that.
I would second that for greater certainty as well, because then it helps the framework, especially at the moment. We don't know what the revenue is going to be in 21, so we can then, we have time to review, and this is first reading stage. So as well, so I think we've got to remember it's first reading, and as a business plan formulates, and we can work with you and take it from there.
Thank you. My thoughts are that I thought when we were talking about short-term vacation rental, the policy, that we had talked about sustainable tourism management, and I'm a bit surprised to see the word tourism marketing in here, because I thought that what we were trying, anyway, I thought the sustainable tourism management was what was in the policy, and I'm wondering if we can change the words, instead of tourism marketing programs and projects, whether we can change it to sustainable tourism management projects to match our policy as short-term vacation policy. And so that would be in the first whereas and in 4.1 that we just looked at.
I think the bylaw is consistent with the wording used by the program itself. However, the business plan that we submit details what the funds would go towards. I think that would be the better place for specifying the management side of tourism.
Can we add it in?
Into the bylaw?
Yeah. Well, I'm just, what I want to do is make sure that it's in there, sustainable tourism management, because right now it looks like promotion, marketing, tourism marketing programs and projects. And I understand it doesn't need to be that, but I think it would be clearer for everybody, like 20 years from now, if it included the words sustainable management or something. Responsible management, I think, was another term that was used in text there somewhere.
Okay, I would have to follow up with the program, just to see, like I said, it was the exact terminology that they used in the program. So I don't know if they have, I mean, it goes through review through both of the ministries, and then, I don't want it to be something that they get caught up on. So let me follow up on that.
I hear you, but it's also our bylaw, so I feel like I need to speak up, so thank you.
I'm just wondering, Sue Ellen, if just putting management in there between tourism and marketing might be sufficient. Will be
It
applied
could
to
also
tourism
go just in the whereas there at the top, right under the bylaw.
Mhm.
You know, that's where I was thinking of it originally. Whereas council wishes to raise revenue for the purchases of financing tourism marketing, that I don't think is what we thought of at the time. But if it said, if it was just in a whereas, maybe they would be okay for us to say sustainable management of tourism, something like that.
I think the words are right in the legislation for the MRDT. I haven't got that page up in front of me, I managed to delete it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
I just have one piece to add, that if you want it for clarity, you should add it to the whereas, because the whereases are not legally binding in a bylaw.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
it's to help people understand later on, what were we thinking of.
So you don't like the marketing part of it,
I don't want to make this stumble and fall in the eyes of the legislation. I don't want to make it ineligible, but I do want to add the words sustainable management in there somewhere, and into that first whereas. So
Well,
if you need me to move that, I will move that.
We have all the questions first. There's a sustainable tourism is a recognized word in the industry, and tourism management is a recognized word. And sustainable.
That's why I wanted to say sustainable tourism management.
is not a recognized word.
I recognize it.
They're
This is
mixing
for us on Bowen Island, I think, in the future. And I'm just, anyway, that's what I would like to see, and I think it would be better supported by the community over the long term, and it would be clearer to councils of the future.
It's not very clear to me. I don't understand that part of it. Why do you want sustainable in
Because this looks like
there? Sorry. It's just a marketing.
marketing, but that's not what we talked about when we talked about the short-term vacation rental policy. The words sustainable, what was it called? Tourism management was the words, not tourism marketing.
It's so subjective.
Could I just remind us that that actually is the language that Tourism Bowen used when they spoke with us. They were concerned about tourism management, and getting funding through the MRDT was one way that they could up their game and do more management of tourism. So I think Sue Ellen has a point, and I think Hope has a point. And if that language could be put into the whereas, and Emma's still left with the language of the program, which is largely tourism promotion, I think those would be reasonable revisions.
Still want sustainable in there, or just management? I don't have a problem with management, I just have a problem with sustainable
I don't
management.
know what sustainable management means. I
No, I don't
understand
know
what
what it
sustainable
means. I find it
tourism means, I
very
understand what tourism management means, but I have no idea what sustainable tourism management
Means it's ongoing, obviously.
It means that the impacts on the community are not as negative as they might be if there were not sustainable tourism management. And I mean, that's part of the whole issue around the tourism. You know, we have been very successful, and it has its downside. And tourism Bowen is keen to help mitigate the downside.
So that's the management.
Mm.
The sustainable to me means not impacting the environment and things like that.
David, you have a comment here, please?
Well, Maureen covered what I wanted to say. The discussion that we had at the time, that was one of the things that really impressed me, that they wanted to spend the money to make sure that the impact on the island was being managed well. And that's, whether the word is sustainable, we're not meaning sustainable in this sense, meaning it goes on forever. What we mean is, its impact on the island, but I'm not sure that sustainable is the best word. I can't come up with a better one quickly, but that meant, that's what it meant to me, but it might not.
I think there is a sustainable tourism field in that part, you know, the idea that the tourism overloads the community and the quality of the visitor experience goes down and the quality of the citizens' experience goes down. And that's the sustainability I mean. But
I think if I'm recalling correctly, the term is destination management.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're referring to. But
I don't know what the
just
right
cover
word
it.
is, but as long as that word management is in there, I will be content.
Let's just do management.
Want to change it from marketing to management?
No, you have
Marketing to
to.
marketing.
Just
and-
add in management between a couple of commas and I'll be okay, or put it in the whereas. It is in the whereas, that's what I'm
Number one,
proposing, is to
whereas.
put it in the first whereas.
Tourism, marketing, comma, management, comma, programs and projects.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Me too.
Okay.
So I would move that amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous.
You have me on the speaker list?
Sorry?
You have me on the speaker list?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't understand your timeline. I think it's overly ambitious, because can we give 3 readings to a bylaw at 1 meeting?
Well,
I don't think we can.
Yeah, we're only giving first reading to the bylaw tonight, so
Yeah.
I've got a note here. I've got a note to myself about, you were hoping to adopt the bylaw February 24th. If we can get a second and third reading, we'll need a further, we can't do it till March 9th. That's the schedule way out? Okay.
So going along with that, having looked at the sample templates for the business plans and everything, and I think it is supposed to be available for council to review, so when were you going to give us the business plan to look at? If I'm
In the next
I was reading
meeting.
through the application process document.
Planning to finish the business plan this week and include it in the next council meeting's agenda.
So it would be in the February 24th, where you want a second for reading. Okay, so, and, I don't understand why you're not excluding Metro. It says very clearly in the application form that the regional district has to send a letter of approval.
Destination BC told me not to.
Could it be that we're also having you refer to Islands Trust?
Well, the Islands Trust is, where we is,
Right.
the planning aspect for the OCP and land use bylaws, but this isn't a land use bylaw, and it's not an OCP. So, and it's consistent with our OCP. I'd hate to send it in and then find out that whoever the
Yeah,
person was.
yeah, the person I talked to didn't go into detail, but it sounded like they had some sort of arrangement with Metro Vancouver, so it was not necessary. Meaning Metro Vancouver would support the MRDT across.
So they've given them a blanket approval. So it
That's
might
what it sounded
be
like, I don't know the
just
details.
worth checking that one out. And then, so the money and the, you've got a comment in the report about, so the people that register through the third party and only advertise through the third party, so Airbnb or VRBO. But if they advertise locally, then they're no longer exempt
From,
the consultation process.
well, to,
And most of our people advertise on their own websites,
They-
and
they
they
can-
advertise
they can
through
advertise on
the.
their own website, it's still considered online. And also they need to have more than 4 units of accommodation.
But what happened, okay, well, we're gonna have to put the line, because I think we need, if somebody sells the unit directly themselves, then I think they're caught in our, they're not under the exemption of not having to be. But you are gonna consult with the B&Bs and the other people that are offering as part of your broader stakeholder consultation, they're gonna be
Well, we're
invited.
going to have an information session and we'll advertise that for 2 weeks through all the municipal communication channels. And I will personally make sure that the people that are required, the 6 that have been identified, are consulted. I mean, I will go out there in person.
Okay, and the revenue projections, you got something in here, what you said. Based on third-party data over the past 2 years, the estimated annual revenue from short-term accommodation ranges from 1.4 mil to 1.9 mil. So how much revenue are you estimating are going to come from those 6?
From the 6?
Yeah.
I have from the short-term rental data, the estimated revenue from online accommodation providers.
And those are people that advertise online through them. So I'm guessing one of the 6 probably doesn't advertise online through them.
In one of the data sets I have, there was an estimate on short-term accommodations that weren't considered OAP.
Okay. Is that information shareable with council?
I think so.
So we could come and have a look at the data sets then?
All right, let's, we move this ahead somehow. Wayne?
Just one last point, Emma, the numbering needs tidied up at the end of the bylaw. It's just gotten a little out of sync. Yeah, got it, okay.
I have one more question.
Yes.
As Islands trustee, I was going to suggest that we refer to the Islands Trust, but did I understand from your slides that you're already going to consult with them?
Oh, we have,
Islands Trust?
yeah, it's actually, I need to follow up this week, but it should have gone to the executive committee last week.
Okay, because I don't think I saw it. And I'm on the executive committee. So you may want to follow up.
Yes, I'll find that out, I guess.
Do we need to cover that? That doesn't need to be covered off in the referral.
It was on the slide.
No.
So, hope you have that, we're just gonna change the first whereas there, and put management in there.
And also the
The 50-50
even split
splits.
in the last clause.
Well, may I make a comment on that one? Because I'm not supportive of the 50-50, and partly because we don't know what the short-term rental, what issues are gonna pop up that the 3% is gonna help mitigate. And if we decide we might need more on the affordable housing side, I don't wanna
Have to change it by.
why would we have to, why would we do that? We should just keep it open and then we can make decisions whether it's 50-50 or 1 year it might be a bit more here, a bit more there. I don't see why we would cut ourselves like that and restrict ourselves. So I think we should keep it open like the way it's written. I agree with your management and the whereas, and I'd be prepared to move that motion, but I don't see a reason why we would say 50-50 and be stuck with that going forward and then have to change it down the road. When we can do that, we can do 50-50, we can do 30-70. I like the flexibility in that one, so.
I'd just like to speak to them. I don't like the flexibility of it because I think that there may be a tendency down the road for there to be a larger proportion given to tourism. I'm interested in protecting the funds that would go to the Affordable Housing Fund. And as well, what adding in the equal split is consistent with the policy that we approved several meetings ago. So that's already been something that we have adopted in principle.
It could work against you, though.
Yeah. Maybe a
Could
suggestion
be
on
more
that,
going to
Maureen,
the
because
affordable
that's
housing.
part of my concern actually, is that I would be willing to do something, because I think the affordable housing component is key for me, especially knowing that the other side can only fund the tourism management side. So we could potentially say that or say that at least 50% goes to affordable housing, so we make sure we're keeping that as a set, but that we can also expand it if need be in that. I just don't want to limit us.
Be happy with that, at least.
Because it would limit us to 50% and nothing more.
I'm not sure if that is, could that be, does that make sense to you?
So it would basically read that instead of 50-50, 50 split, 50 management or promotion, it would be at least 50% goes to affordable housing.
Could I hear Emma's response, please?
I'm not sure what the difference would be. If 50-50 split were specified in the bylaw, it would be the 50-50. But if you're saying like a minimum of 50, is there an intention to increase the share to affordable housing? Like, I'm just not sure.
I guess the disadvantage to the 50-50 would be we could only spend 50% on affordable housing. If we say a minimum of 50%, we're committing to 50% affordable housing. But let's say there's more need for affordable housing, we can go to 70% hypothetically, or 80, or 100, or whatever. So we have that flexibility where now we would only be able to spend 50%.
I think that would be a discussion for council. The last direction was from the short-term rental policy, which specified 50-50.
Yes, Your Worship. I think we're struggling with something maybe unnecessary. Because if in another year you want to decrease it from 50 to something else, you're going to have the same debate. You're going to have a motion of council. If you want clarity and you want to put it in the bylaw, 50% tourism, 50% housing, this is the time to amend the bylaw. We can put a provision in there before you give it first reading. And if 2 years from now you change your mind, you have the same discussion and you amend the bylaw. It just means that it takes 2 meetings instead of 1 meeting. But I think from a staff perspective, everybody's perspective, at least until the bylaw is changed, it's clear. If you say not less than 50, or then it kind of leaves somebody wondering, well, where is it? I think it adds to the uncertainty. So if it's certainty we're looking for, I would suggest you leave it at 50-50, knowing that you can always change it another year by a simple amendment to the bylaw.
And I wonder if that might not be achieved by adding the words, again, in that first whereas, by adding the words after affordable housing initiatives, 50-50 each, or something, some better word. Because then it could read, whereas council wishes to raise revenue for the purchase of financing tourism, marketing, management projects and affordable housing initiatives through a 50-50 split.
I would suggest you put it,
Whereas
our
is
corporate officers already made a very good point that the whereas clauses are not legally binding, they're just for, to add to the interpretation. You better put it as one of the provisions in the bylaw.
Okay, I just didn't want to
It's binding and clear.
trip any eligibilities.
Well, that's my concern by going to the bylaw. Emma, did I hear you correctly, and you said that the general fund can only be used for tourism?
Yes.
So,
Well, I'm sorry, explain that. You could apply towards affordable housing, but you would have to make a special application.
okay, so the problem being, even if we put 50, if the general fund is 75%, and the online platforms are only 25%.
At some future time?
Yeah, because to fit in the online platform one, if I'm reading the definition correctly, you have to only sell through the online platform. Otherwise, it's generated. So what you sell yourself and remit yourself is different from what's remitted through the online platform. So given that we don't really know how the numbers are gonna fall out, and if you want to provide guidance that you'd like 50-50, then I would go along with the whereases. If you want to put it in the bylaw, I think we're causing ourselves problems. And the more we stick with the generic bylaw that the province likes, the better chance we are of going through quickly. Because timing-wise, I don't see how, we're not going to meet, we want to get it into them by April Fool's Day, funny how hot. And then they've got to process it in enough time that we can give adequate lead time notice to all the people that are going to have to start collecting. And that's somewhere in the legislations or regulations as well. So.
This is only for first reading,
I know, but we don't want to hold the process up with the province is what I'm saying. So the more we stick to their standard template, the better off we would be.
Yeah,
Timing-wise.
I agree. Can always be changed in the future. So what does everybody feel about that?
Well,
Just let it go as it is?
I'd like to move the motion with the whereas on the management side.
Yeah,
I'd
we
like
got
to-
that,
But
yeah.
I'd like to move it without the 50/50. I think we need that flexibility.
Okay, we've already amended it to include the word management.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we've already, so I'd like to move that motion.
Oh,
He's moving in there, we've passed and moved.
I think what
Okay,
he's,
good.
I think what he's moving is that bylaw number 504,
Yeah.
right?
I'll be read it first time.
Yeah.
Go, so read it out, Rob, what you want to say.
Bylaw number 504, 2020 cited as Bowen Island Municipality Short-Term Accommodations Tax Bylaw number 504, 2020.
As amended.
As amended, be read first time.
Second?
I will second that one out of exhaustion, if nothing else.
Further
Sorry, I'm
discussion?
just gonna jump in.
Yep.
It's very vague as amended because we've just talked about lots of amendments, so I'm gonna
Oh,
specify.
specify the, yeah.
Okay. I
And
thought
to
we
be
only moved
clear,
and seconded one amendment.
okay, but just there's been discussion, so just
I
so
thought
we're
we
all on the
voted.
same page.
Yeah.
That we're inserting management into the first whereas clause.
Okay,
Oh.
perfect, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Yeah. Opposed? Maureen? Allison?
Oh, I put my hand up for him.
Okay.
Look forward to receiving the business plan and then we
Councillor
can think.
Nicholson and opposite. Thank you. Okay, well, that was easy.
Thank you.
So, 6.2, thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Emma.
Bowen Island Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 498, 2019, and the Bowen Island Land Use Bylaw Amendment Bylaw number 499. That's one today, no more.
So,
Thank you, David.
thank you, Mayor. So we're talking about a rezoning application, an OCP amendment application at 720 Gardner Lane in the middle of Bowen. So it's this location just off of Adams and Belmont Road. So this property has a rural residential designation in the OCP, and in the land use bylaw, it has a split zoning of rural residential 3 and 2, which allow uses like dwelling agriculture, horticulture, domestic agriculture, stable, and kennel. So the application that is before you is to rezone a 4-hectare portion of that property to be rural commercial 2 to allow for a retreat center to be developed on this lower portion of the site. And so the original application was to leave the remainder unchanged, but I'll get into that in more detail. So this first came to you in September. You were introduced to the application and you referred it to a number of committees. I directed staff to prepare bylaws to do the amendments to the land use bylaw and the official community plan. Staff returned to council December 9th meeting with the comments from the committees. And at that meeting, council referred the bylaws back to staff and made a number of suggestions or directions to staff for things to explore within the bylaw. So I'll go through those with you and in the report. But so in essence, and Troy's didn't show up as well as could be, but what staff and the applicant are proposing is for a 2-hectare park dedication to be done on this western side of the property. So I can't see on this, but I know that it's in the report that previously, on the previous time when we came to December, the park proposed was about 1.1 hectares and sort of cut closer to this side. And so the applicant and I have worked to sort of expand that park area to be a larger area. And then part of the motivation was to keep the lot sizes at the lot size that's specified in the official community plan, so it's a 1-hectare area. So we were looking to go a 2-hectare park dedication and keep the lot sizes consistent with the OCP. And then this would still see the 4-hectare or 10-acre retreat center area. And what's also in the report that council had asked for is for an overall development plan of the site. So what you see here in gray is some of the proposed additions should the rezoning go ahead. What do the applicants see as the future build out of the site? So we specified they would look to develop a little more up on the ridge where the sun is probably the best for the staff accommodation of potentially another retreat center building and some additional small cabins lower down when you enter the site. What also doesn't show up well on this image from here on this slide, but is the proposed riparian corridor. So the covenant area is shown here, an area to be protected by a conservation covenant. So then, according to staff, have amended the 2 bylaws that are before you. So for the OCP amendment would place this portion of the land in a park designation and this portion of it in a retreat commercial designation. And then the land use bylaw does a very similar change in that this becomes the park. This becomes the area for the retreat center, and this bit in the middle stays as residential zoning. So the land use bylaw in more detail, so place that RR2 into the RC2, the retreat center zone. Amend the retreat center zone to have a regulation on the amount of staff accommodation permitted. So that was coming from the APC. We're concerned that it, as it currently allows, it's sort of an open-ended allowance on staff accommodation. And so we have the definition of staff accommodation. And then it would place that portion into the park zone and place the remainder of the property into the rural residential 3C zone, which is that 1 hectare minimum lot size. So the recommendation from staff is that council give first reading to the 2 bylaws, to refer them to the APC, to the Parks, Trails, Greenways Committee, and to the Islands Trust. And then council advise the applicant to hold a public open house prior to consideration of second reading.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Rob?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the report, Daniel. At first when this came, I was a bit nervous, like, oh, I saw subdivided lots and, I don't want to see sprawl going on into these areas, and we're putting more usage on an area that's very forested now. I did have a great walk around with SAT, and I really like what they're doing, and I think they really have the protection of the environment front and center, so I think he gets that. So that really helped settle me down with that, and I was happy to see that. I guess one of the things that still concerns me is in that area B, with those 2 extra lots in there. So we're going to be upzoning a chunk of the property and then still retaining the ability for extra residential development there, which I know they're not planning, but potentially down the road. So I would be more comfortable if the upzoning happened to the entire property instead of just a little chunk of it, and then still, so it would be.
Upzoning, what do you mean?
Or the, and maybe you heard me ask my earlier question, so maybe you can comment on.
So just to be clear, for what Rob's talking about would be simply zoning this portion of it entirely in the retreat center zone and then the park zone on the remainder. So removing the residential lot zoning.
The 2 residential.
Yeah, knowing that we're doing that. Do you have any comments? Like, is that feasible, easy to do? Is that, what's the logistics?
I mean, from council's point of view, it's easy. It's just amending the bylaw, and you can do it. I mean, I think, so you asked the applicant today, I think for their sake, they probably want to think about it a little bit in terms of the zoning currently allows the 2 lots, like has zoning for the 2 lots on that portion of it and zoning for 1 lot on the other side. So there's an element to it of in terms of like what they're doing now. They're running a bed and breakfast with 4 guest cabins, and they can do that in the current zoning. So at what stage is the increased zoning for the retreat center, more worth it to them than the potential of two lots that they could be selling?
David?
I echo a lot of Rob's comments. I mean, I like the work that the proponent has done. It's, as Rob said, sensitive to the environment, really nicely done, small footprint buildings and so on, so really good. And it's also on the main transportation route with a bus, so it's a good location that way. One thing, Daniel, that you mentioned was an extension, a covenant to extend Mike's Lord Trail in that bottom right-hand corner. And I like that in your report. I don't see that right now.
Right, so what this was talking about was the riparian covenant shown here. And then the report had talked about, this was the original proposal, was a trail up this side, or trail easement up this side of the property. And when the Parks and Trails viewed it, they saw more value in this side. And so what the report talked about is that maybe we still require the trail easement up this side for potential. So there's no plan right now. So when the Parks and Trails looked at it, they said coming down this way is going to be tricky. So they saw more value in this side, but maybe as council we still say, but we're still going to take the trail easement because in the future maybe we want to expand.
Well, I would certainly see it that way. I didn't know that it had to go all the way up. I assumed it was just, below the creek. And that's all, just a tiny little sliver, because it could join up down the road sometime.
And that seems like the most logical in terms of the landlords comes across, and the theory is, it could come further, and then maybe it'll end up, if you want to get across these property lines kind of jig, so maybe if we can come down a bit and jig over, and having that little bit, would give the options.
So in terms of what Rob is suggesting, the thing that I don't like about this is the sort of suburban sprawl that you've slapped in the middle of this area with those 2 lots and a bunch of road building up there. Why not And I know there's supposed to be a minimum of 1 hectare, but it would seem to me to follow the principles of conservation development, that if we had the 2 of them down the bottom half of that, you're not having to build that second road, you're clustering the houses easily on a road that you have to build anyway, or that exists anyway. And then you've got increasing the size of the park by another hectare.
Seems to me when we looked at the property, behind the first blob, the lower one, is a cliff like this. And in front of the blob at the top is a cliff like this. So those are the only 2 building sites that are flat.
Yes, that's one thing I couldn't say, although I am looking at the topography, I can see little contour lines there, and it looks as if there's a spot, and we've got a road right there, so it would seem to be a pretty
And
house
my
right
also
there. But I don't know.
understanding is, right now, this road doesn't work very well for, now maybe it'll get improved for things like ambulances and fire trucks and stuff like that.
I'm not opposing the road that goes up to the top, Alison. I'm saying, why do we then need a road that goes into the top half of what's called Lot 2? That's the road that I think we don't need to have, and we could bring the house down.
Isn't that how they're, okay. I guess what I was saying was I thought that was the only, that road exists, the one going up to the top on the right.
On the right, which is fine.
And that's the only way
Which is fine.
the
Not
emergency
opposing that.
vehicles can get in because they come in from.
Alison, I'm not opposing that. I'm opposing the other road going up to that other lot, Lot 2. Say, bring it down, have the 2
Or
houses
could
in the
it
lot.
be accessed from the other side?
Just talking about clustering, that's all.
Yeah, no, I.
Principal clustering.
Maureen?
I think we're discussing a very significant potential change to
So-
what was originally proposed. And perhaps Daniel needs to have a conversation with the proponent before we take this much further. The 2 hectare park may not be part of the picture, or may not be as large if there isn't a lot 1 and a lot 2 to potentially be resold at some point down the road.
I recognize that, and I agree it would be a conversation.
And I would assume that you might need to sell lot 1 and lot 2 to pay for the expansion and the new buildings up top.
Which is a huge upzoning.
Well, not if you're using it to fund the further development.
Doesn't matter what you're using it for, it's still an upzoning.
It's not cash
What do we see as an alternative?
What do you mean?
Well, we're gonna send it back to Daniel to look at what. If we're gonna send it back to Daniel, look at something.
I'm the first, if people are liking what I'm saying. If not, then it needs to be in, let it go as is. Or what Rob suggested, you can pitch both of them.
Well, for me not seeing it, because I wasn't here, it's rather difficult. That just looks like a flat piece of land. And it's very much, excuse my grammar, not a flat piece of land. And I'm just wondering why we're having this conversation at this juncture.
Do you not want to separate those lots, lot 1 and 2, from the actual, the rest of it?
Yes,
you wanna
I
split
would
those
say
up?
remove
That's
lot.
what we're doing.
Yes, that's correct, but I would just cluster the houses into lot 1 so that lot 2 then just becomes part of it.
So they can change
Part
your
of the park.
size.
Okay, so we're not happy the way it is. I think that somehow we gotta get further discussion on this, but what if we put lot 2 and lot 1 together?
That's what I'm suggesting, yeah. What do you mean, but keep it as, I'm not sure anything here.
Keep it as 1 lot.
Well, then you've only got 1 lot, not 2.
That's correct.
So, Daniel,
Yeah, go ahead.
these lots, in the OCP, in both cases, land use bylaw and OCP, these are going to retain the RR3 zoning. That's what they are currently.
Yeah.
Are they currently separate?
No.
The whole thing is 1 parcel, and
Okay,
it's
so
got
these
multiple
would be a
zoning.
proposed subdivision later.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is RR3 right now?
Yeah, so a portion of the retreat centers are R2 and then RR3.
So under the RR3 and RR2, as it stands right now, how many lots is he allowed?
3.
3. So he's not getting anything that isn't already allowed,
The number of lots.
number of lots.
Well, you would be getting the ability to have more than 4
The
bedrooms.
But the,
For
for
his bed
having
and
the number
breakfast.
of lots is not an issue, is what is allowed under the land use bylaw right now and the OCD. So what the upzoning is for the, really, to get the retreat center zoning, to have, so that you can have, they can have more than, 4, or more than 4 guest bedrooms.
That's what it said.
Yeah. But,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the retreat rezoning, that's fine. Make that happen, everybody I think is
but
is
he's
happy
not
about
getting
that.
anything more than what
Okay,
he's
2
able
extra
to
lots.
have. No, he's not, because he's already allowed to do that. He could forget about the retreat zoning and divide that into 3 lots tomorrow and sell it.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
So the current zone would allow just be a 10-acre lot and 2 5-acre lots.
So,
They make 10 acre lots, 4 hectares, yeah.
I haven't spoken yet, but I have a question. Where do we have, people are referring to conservation development. Have we adopted a principle or, okay,
It's being,
because, yeah, all right, fair enough, that's fine. I just want to make sure I hadn't missed something.
Just talking about principle, that's all.
And because when I think about conservation development and some of the successful developments that have happened on Bowen, I'm thinking more about a 50% park dedication
That's correct.
and other sustainability elements, whether that's reduced parking so that there's not so much traffic in the neighborhood, or trails that the people there and other people can use, shared trails.
Yeah.
And, okay, well then, I just wanted to be clear about that, because I do agree that this is a pretty significant uplift for a piece of fairly steep parkland. However, it would allow us, park and trail users, to get up into Crown Land.
Yep.
I have, to my regret, not walked around that parkland yet either, to know the lay of the land better up in that section. So I wonder if that might not be a next step, is to explore the proposed park amenity.
didn't the Park and
More.
Trail Committee do that?
They did, but I couldn't be there. And they did it at an earlier stage when there was just a sort of, no park was proposed, it was a trail. I
Yeah,
forget what
that's
it was,
right,
but it was
that's
much simpler, yeah.
Gary, I'm sorry, I mean, I really like this proposal, and so I don't want to just sort of throw a spanner in the works here, but
Yeah.
I was thinking more about the 50%, as Sue Ellen was saying, and I could see how we could do that by clustering those two home sites together, and so we still have 2 home sites. We have somewhere around 50% park, and we have this very nicely done retreat. That was how I saw it, that's all.
And what are the lots look like?
They're half a hectare, basically.
Yeah.
What's that, a bit more than an acre? And roughly in that area, like, I'm not going exactly.
So let's just try to get this together here. Is the general feeling is that there's too much land being subdivided? Is that what we're feeling, and we want to cut down, make more park out of that? I'm just asking.
I guess so. I'm thinking about the principles of conservation development that we've been talking about and that we have in our island plan right now, I believe.
Yeah, because I thought when we sent that back to Daniel last time, was we said we'd like to move the park down here.
Yeah, we talked about close to
Yeah.
50%, Gary, and that's sort of what I'm looking for.
Which basically didn't happen.
Gary,
Yeah.
I realise that some people had a chance to walk the retreat, which seems to have got pretty general approval. In the spirit of moving us ahead, even if it seems one step, no pun intended, back, maybe we need to do the same, to get a better focus on that parkland up there, because as Councillor Morse has said, you know, it's steeply banked, well, good, but I can't tell that from the plan. That's very difficult.
Do I need another site visit?
Well, I'm just saying, we seem to be in violent agreement on the whole issue of the retreat. To try and move this forward for the good folk as quickly as possible, rather than talk about this endlessly, looking at a flat piece of screen. Maybe we actually need to go and do that second investigation, because then the land will probably speak for itself and will make sense of it, because to discuss it like this is very, very difficult. I frankly can't do it. I just, you know, we work, I haven't been there, but those that have had to be out there, so sadly, because it's a delay, I think that's the only way of answering.
The delays, okay, Daniel?
Sure. I mean, I just want to speak to, I guess, a bit the park size and the park location. That part of the thinking and crafting it was ended up with sort of a usable park space. So it sort of encompasses two of the ridges that are there and the space around them, and as it comes down.
Yeah. So that's all sort of cliff along there.
Yeah, and so it's sort of expanding. You know, we sort of looked at that and go, well, we could push it. You know, the park could get pushed in the various parts, but it kind of just gives us land for park that isn't. You know, isn't as useful, or that, you know, there could be a park that's the cliff in the middle or something to make it, the numbers different, but it doesn't meaningfully.
Doesn't make it good park use.
Yeah, so it's sort of the balancing act of, we want to make sure the land is protected, and, you know, we want to follow those principles, but we also don't, you know, we want to sort of have a park that we're going to be useful to us, and we're not just taking it so that we say we're going to make it a park.
I'm just where I'm going to slightly disagree with Diana. But yes, I love parks that are lovely, that I can walk around in, but the idea of protecting land is also for the purpose of protecting the land, because we need to do that.
Agreed.
Daniel, have you got a map of where it sits in the whole area?
I don't think I have one.
I mean, the top line, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all crown land and all green, right to the back of it, right? So, and you can sort of see the different coloring in the trees, which would be partly the cliff.
So I think the different colors, the zoning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, I was thinking more sort of ground available, which would be more the
Yeah,
part.
I mean, you can see, basically this line is the ridge line kind of.
That's what that dotted line is?
Yeah.
I think that's more the previous proposal, but in essence, the land is very, you know, when we went on the site visit here, right, you can see it sort of immediately comes up, and then this is sort of the ridge line along the side of it.
Gary, as a suggestion, I'm wondering perhaps if Daniel and the proponent talked a little bit more about that option of increasing the park, clustering the homes, whether that would be workable. I don't know the practicalities of it in terms of the shape of the land and the feasibility of it from the proponent's perspective.
Yeah, we're obviously not happy. Is anybody happy the way that is?
Yes,
You are?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. Anybody
And
else?
I'm remembering that the more we ask and the more we push, we may end up with nothing.
Yeah.
I'm moderately happy. Certainly this is not a hill to die on. I just thought that was a way of moving it more towards what I would hope to see. But, you know, I certainly like the work that's been done, and I don't want to
compromise that.
Gary, I don't see this proponent like doing that right now. Like, I think probably the way it's gonna look is forested area with the retreat on that side. That's probably what it is. It's more what happens down the road. Okay, what happens in 20 years when it gets sold, and then somebody else is different, will want to blow a road, and then
Now this still has to go, it has to go through subdivision too, that's the other thing.
yeah.
It has to go through the whole subdivision procedure.
But they can technically do that, right? So
Well,
this is the time where we can say, okay, we're gonna give you more here, and that's the protection that we would have then would be added on.
So, you have your hand up?
Well, just in terms of process, one thing, an auction, we've spoken about our concerns and our ideas here. We could invite the public to speak to through giving it second reading, which triggers the public input process. I don't know if that's exactly the, where exactly that would happen and all that kind of thing, but at this point, it's not really, until we pass first reading.
Okay, and it's gotta go through the APC too, they'll have something to say about it.
Yeah. So we're just doing first readings,
Yeah,
so right
that's
now.
on his first reading. So,
I'll move.
Well, I had one question on the wording in the bylaw itself.
okay,
There's two small typos, which I just sent out, in 499. In 499, the retreat center definition, you added accessory buildings. I'm wondering if you need a qualifier on accessory buildings, so they're accessory to retreat center use. Or ancillary to accessory buildings, ancillary, uses are. That's in the land.
I don't think I added that.
No, you've got and accessory buildings.
Yeah.
But does accessory buildings mean it has to be a use related to a retreat center?
I would assume so, given that it's not accessory use, but it's
I don't know
accessory.
what's do we have, is accessory building defined in the land use bylaw?
Yeah.
So if it says accessory to the principal use, then
okay, does anybody want to just move the original?
Yes, I will do that first reading.
Okay. All right, and any further discussion, all in favor? Let's see what this comes back with, and take it from there.
Good.
Okay, next on the agenda here. Sorry, I just gotta put it in that place here.
7.1.
Okay, so the covenant amendment, 341 Josephine Drive, Emma, back again.
Whichever one has to. Hello again, Mayor and Council. This application was actually meant to come to council previous meeting, so the presentation, I think, has kind of fallen through the cracks. So it's pretty straightforward. I will just go off of the staff report, and I believe the amendment is fairly straightforward. We're looking at a covenant area that was placed on title back in 2002 at the time of subdivision to protect the water quality and the natural habitat around Josephine Lake. This area is fairly large for this lot, 341 Josephine Drive, and covered about half, if not more, more than half of the property. And was actually amended in 2011 to allow for the construction of a single detached family home. The owners have now come with another covenant amendment proposal to further reduce that covenant area. And the main reason being they would like to do some landscaping, some clearing of vegetation near the house, and the house is surrounded by the protective covenant. So an environmental assessment was submitted, and the professional opinion was that the reduction in the protective area would not be detrimental to the intent of the covenant. Internal review by staff, particularly the manager of environments and parks, did raise some concerns around removing the protection around one of the wetlands on the property. And that's to the south of the property. It actually straddles the southern boundary lot line. And I believe there is a plan in the staff report showing the second wetland. So the proposal will reduce the covenant area, but maintaining it around the wetland. So I guess that's where the presentation would be nice, but you have the picture in the report. Essentially, it's a reduction in the covenant area while still maintaining protection around the lake and the second wetland to the south. This has been found satisfactory to all parties, so staff is recommending that council approve this covenant amendment.
All right, so.
Thank you for the report, and I think the covenant's in there a couple of times. The second one has the yellow marks. I recognize that, you know, this area was clear-cut logged, must be 30 years ago now, something like that. So the vegetation is coming up thick and dark and not exactly a landscaped, beautiful front yard now that the covenant was amended to put a house there in 2011. But my concern is with, and where I would like to ask staff for more information, so I hope that council will support me in this, is in the ecological, environmental, climate implications. I don't see anything, this lake is the water source for Cowan Point, and this property and all the downstream houses, all down part of the Cowan Point neighborhood, as I understand it. And I believe the dam has already been raised once and has flooded part of the wetland. And I know in the previous term, or maybe it was early this term, we've received letters from citizens living on Cowan Point, concerned that they didn't have enough water to do the things they wanted to do. So my question is, what about climate change? If there is longer, drier summers, might that dam need to be raised again? Or might the heavy, intense rainfalls that we are getting, they're more intense in the winters, might that lead to more sediment entering the lake, as I've heard can happen? What about with these changes, including the, as we saw with some of the invasive plants a couple of years ago, a very dry summer, and the Japanese knotweed kind of took off around Grafton Lake. I just don't see anything in here about the future. It's based on years of past observations and around the recommendations made back at the time, which were to protect the whole shoreline of this water. It's kind of a natural water reservoir now with the dam. And so I just don't see anything about climate implications for the future in this report. And I would like to know, could we be looking at the dam being raised again in the future, or water shortages? The whole business of water supply, maybe it's not mentioned specifically in the covenant. It mentions water quality, but I'm concerned about water supply, and I believe I would like to see what the climate implications might be to this proposal, because it's also setting a precedent. It's removing protection from the edge of the wetland back to only 2 meters. That's only, you know, that's not very big. And I think, while I sympathize with people that want to create biodiversity, landscaping might also be adding, you know, that's only these owners. They could sell in a few years, and it might be different owners who would have different plans, whereas the protection of the nature there, the soils, the natural structures, the plants, wildlife habitat would be removed. And so I would like more information from staff about implications of climate change.
Okay, Maureen?
2 questions, and I may have missed this. How much of a reduction is anticipated? There's a lot of detail here, forgive me if it's stated.
got a little bubble.
Sorry, I dropped it off over there too. I believe it's the removal of the first wetland, and the buffer along the lake remains the same.
And how much is that?
In area?
Yeah,
Don't have that number.
that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm having trouble figuring out what was there before and what.
Yeah.
Well, you can see that
Well, I've got black and white, it's all black and white lines and.
the previous amendment, all they did was take that little bubble, there's a little bubble that comes out at the side of it, and they basically taken that out, that was a wetland.
But
where's
at
the
the
house?
See
same,
that one and that one.
at the same time, the little bubble on the page doesn't tell me anything about the actual area
Yeah,
that
there's no
is
pictures of the actual.
being affected. The other point is one that. I
Page
wanted to-
122 of 258?
The other point I wanted to make is similar to Sue Ellen's point, in that my understanding is that there are quite a few properties in this area that have restrictive covenants on
They
them.
all do.
And there is a potential precedent here that we might want to be keeping our eye on.
Now, they're only taking part of the wetland. Did you read the ecological, environmental, and climate implications there? I mean,
I
they
did.
thought about
And
it, yeah. you
Where,
just don't think they
which
were
page
serious.
are you on? Are you on the
Page 2
report?
of 97, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mention anything about climate
Well, it says climate implications.
in the title.
In the title it does, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, it's page 122 has a, 122 of 258, page 7 of 8.
Mine doesn't show those, it just shows the pages of the report.
Page 7 of 8 of the
Okay, I think
Alan Whitehead report. I believe it takes the, I can't tell, if we thought about it as setbacks, it reduces the setback to 2 meters
Setback from the lake.
from the
I don't
current
see
covenant
that
line.
changes, does it?
Oh, but what's that relative to the lake?
Where'd that go?
It's in the report.
Where's the new covenant?
I think I need a presentation to understand what is being proposed here. Please.
It's a bit confusing, the covenant is in there twice, and the,
Oh, right.
the,
Where'd you find that?
this is,
Yeah,
page-
yeah.
this is
Oh, I can
on-
tell you, it's under
this
the
is page 122,
Whitehead
258.
report, page 7 of 8.
Yes.
On the actual original agreement?
No,
No, Whitehead
on the-
report?
The
Yeah.
Whitehead
Yeah, I know,
report.
but on my page is because I'm reading an agenda notes, number page, something 1 to 97. So is Alan Whitehead's report first, the new report and the new covenant? I'm having trouble separating.
That's what I mean, I think it's in there twice, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 covenants,
Motion.
and now.
Yeah.
Motion to defer.
Okay, take
Oh, I
it.
found a color picture.
I'll second that. There's too much in here for too specific an issue. Maybe this could come back, let's be clear about what we're talking about and not having to fish through hundreds of pages. This is not an effective use
Can
of our
Hope
time.
put the actual page from the document itself up on the screen?
I could have.
Because I've actually now found, that's the trouble with flipping through page by
Might I
page.
suggest that we defer this, just so that we can
Yes.
have
It's
the,
not
I
in
don't have the
here.
access to the presentation.
I'll make a motion.
We are getting a little late.
Yeah, we did already. I'll second it.
Yeah, okay, all in favor of the deferral? Thank you. We're gonna need some pretty heavy
Sorry,
maps
Alan.
coming into the next one.
I'll try to get some
Setback
climate
from the lake
change
hasn't
information.
changed.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to, that was 7.1. 7.2 is we're going to move 9.1 to the next page.
Where are we now?
Moving 9.1, which is a temporary use permit and development variance permit at 464 Melmore Road, Island Discovery Learning Community. Daniel Martin, back to you.
Thank you. So I have a temporary use permit application and a development variance permit application, both associated with the same development proposal for 464 Melmore Road. So this property is located in the loop. It's located opposite the large, relatively undeveloped property at the foot of Melmore Road. The property is zoned SR2, so settlement residential 2, or standard residential zone, and is designated RSE in the OCP. So Island Learning Discovery Community, IDLC, as you've heard tonight, is a distributed learning program that currently operates out of Cowan Point, property in Cowan Point, and is seeking to relocate to Evergreen Hall at 464 Melmore Road. So the temporary use permit application is applying for the school use as a principal use on this property, and as drafted, the TUP would also permit assembly as an accessory use on the property. And the variance permit is a variance to reduce the required parking on the site. So the land use bylaw for a school use requires 1 space per employee, plus 1 parking space for every 15 square meters of floor area. So when we calculate it out, it would mean 32 parking spaces on the site. So IDLC is applying to reduce the parking to 6 spaces, those spaces required for the school use. So some of the conditions that we've placed in the draft temporary use permit that's before you. So one condition is require a building permit to change the permit occupancy of the building. And so IDLC have employed an architect to do their code compliance consideration. Part of the building permit process will trigger a septic assessment for that change in the building code use. And as well, the occupancy of the building would be capped at 30 people, so that's keeping it in the building code as a Part 9 building, which is more of a residential building as opposed to more of a commercial building. So we place those conditions in the temporary use permit as well to match the building permit requirements. And also what you've seen there is a traffic management plan from IDLC. So IDLC to require and enforce student drop-off to take place on Cardina or at the intersection of Miller and Melmore, so the parking spaces to be used for the employees and not for student drop-off. And so the temporary use permit is proposed to be a 3-year term, running until March of 2023. So the Local Government Act allows temporary use permits to be issued for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, people can apply for a renewal of the temporary use permit, which essentially can take place, and council can issue a renewal with less public notice requirements than a new permit for the same term as given in the original temporary use permit. And then at the end of that period, people can reapply for a new temporary use permit, again, at the council's discretion to consider those applications. That's basically how temporary use permits operate. And so staff are recommending that notice be given for the 2 permits to be considered at the March 9th, 2020 meeting, and to authorize staff to give notice to neighbors to everyone within 100 meters of the property. And I know, Allison, just to come back, I had a question about assembly use that I just wanted to touch on. So the temporary use permit as drafted would permit assembly as an accessory use, and some of that was talking with the applicants about their, so their program and thinking, okay, things, we permit school, it'll permit the school stuff, it'll permit some things that are accessory to school. But thinking potentially there's sort of maybe community type events that would happen during the day that maybe are more of a community or like an assembly use rather than a school use. So I think it was including the assembly would sort of cover it and make sure we're not then later debating it. But
main room downstairs.
Yeah, could be used for some, used for something that's not strictly just the school. And then I think based on the feedback so far, I think I would then put conditions on to say, the hours of operation would be the same as the school use. So it's sort of talking about like daytime events that are taking place that would have the same limit, like 30 people on property.
So then looking at the variance request.
Yeah.
It's 464 Melmore has approximately 410 square meters of floor area, a small amount of which would be excluded from being counted as assembly space. Well, it's a 2-floor building, so I would suggest there's 200 square meters on each floor, and not quite half, a little more than half of the main floor as assembly use. So why are you counting the whole 4,000 square feet of building as for assembly use parking count?
I mean, for the school use, it's for the floor area. And so, the upstairs is like bedrooms where they could be converted to be used for the school. It's hard to say on a building that has no other use that it shouldn't be counted.
But is a bedroom being converted to a classroom assembly space?
I mean, it'll convert the building, right? The building permit will convert use of the building. There's not like a separate dwelling as part of the building, so that we can't say, well, part of it's a dwelling, it doesn't count in the parking calculation because it's all the school.
From the answer you just gave me, I thought to assembly space was the classrooms aren't considered assembly space. It would be the one big room on the main floor that would be considered the assembly space.
No, I would think that like the classrooms, for the purpose of the parking calculation, would be counted as an assembly space for purpose of calculating the parking.
Okay, that was my question, which didn't make sense to me.
Anybody else? So,
My main question is, why we're looking at a temporary use permit rather than a rezoning? Because it seems to me that they're looking at a permanent, a plan for permanence here, and unless I've got something wrong, and with a rezoning process, it would have a more participatory kind of process that would, anyway, it's like putting a cement plant on a temporary use permit. And as much as I value education projects on Bowen Island, and the IDLC is a wonderful one, and I've worked with them in the past in different projects, I would like to know why not a rezoning process.
Sure, I guess there's two answers. One would be logistical in terms of, they're looking for a new place by September. The logistics of having a rezoning completed and conditions done by September, I think is one answer. And the other is the temporary use permit allows local governments to place conditions on the use. So in terms of, we can issue a temporary use permit with conditions on it in terms of, in particular, the parking and the traffic piece, that the proponent knows that they have a temporary use permit. So, generally it's like temporary use permit, you wouldn't want to use it for something where they're actually building a building. So we want to do a temporary use permit so you can build a school and operate it for 3 years, because that doesn't seem feasible. In this case, there'll be a building permit to convert the use, but it'll be, based on the architect's initial look at it, largely sort of safety-related stuff. But at the end of the day, it'll still be a building that could be sold again as a residential building. So in a sense, it's like, both so logistically we can have it in place, but also means we can issue a permit that has conditions on it, says, okay, you think it's going to work well and it's not going to disrupt the neighborhood, well, this way you can get it for 2 school years, versus saying, okay, we'll rezone it forever without seeing how it operates out of the space.
And they're renting, correct?
yeah,
It's
he's
not a-
rental.
So I guess it will be leasing the space.
They'll be
Yeah.
leasing
Yeah.
the space, so if it doesn't work, they can,
David?
at the end of the.
Okay, this is a difficult one, and there's lots that I like about this proposal. I thought it was well thought out, and the building as it is now, I've been to public meetings there where there are all kinds of cars trying to find parking spots all over the place. So it's not that it's an empty, or it's not that it's just a single family home right now. It's basically an inn and a public meeting space. But in the end, it is a very different use in the community, so it comes down to the community. It has to be. And at first I thought, yeah, this is a really interesting idea. School ought to be kind of cool. And then, we'll get 10-to-1 letters. So there needs to be, and I understand they, talked around in the neighborhood and you've heard positive comments, but I think we need a public meeting of some sort where you can actually have a clear presentation and a clear discussion, rather than just sort of reading reports, sending letters. I'd like to see something like that.
I think in these issues we've got deep sympathies and understanding with both the proponent and with the people who wrote the letters. You have to look at intent. Is the intent to be here on a temporary basis, or is the intent to be here on a permanent basis? It is hard to believe with a 3-year course that it's meant to be temporary. And one of the letters described this as rezoning through the back door. And whilst that is rather an unkind remark, this is in fact exactly what it is. Now, if this excellent enterprise is to be here permanently, then sadly, like it or not, the area should be rezoned. I cannot see how that can be shortcut. I hate holding anybody up, but nevertheless, you're imposing this on this residential community. This is a complete change of use. So therefore, it certainly is going to need far more community involvement. It's quite obvious from the 10 letters we've received, and I would suggest if it comes to it, that is probably the tip of the iceberg, because 10 letters will become 15 letters or 20 letters or whatever. It's obviously discordant. Therefore, if the intention is for this to be permanent, let's cut out all the weasel words, can we? And say, if that is the intent, this area needs to be rezoned, and it can go through the appropriate rezoning process, and they can fall on its sword or succeed, depending on the opinion of the neighbourhood. Because this is a community and a neighbourhood issue. And I'm sorry, we're going to get hung up on this TUP, this temporary use permit. Nothing for 3 years is temporary, however, whatever form of language you want to use. And that's a shame, because it disadvantages these excellent people who are trying to do a good thing for a good reason. And I'm truly sorry for that. But a temporary use permit, there is nothing temporary about 3 years. And we will always get tripped up on it. If the intent is to be permanent, then it should be properly rezoned.
Yeah, the TUP just expedites the process while the rezoning perhaps is going on. I mean, that's the other way we can do it, Maureen.
Daniel's report mentions that IDLC has approached the owner of the property with an offer to purchase, provisional on receiving the appropriate municipal permit. So I think that goes to your question.
I think it does.
Intent.
Okay. Is that it, Maureen?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I get your point, and I think you're right. I mean, 3 years, this is probably looking long-term down the road. I am also concerned that if they are going to be moved out of their space in September, that's going to be a huge issue for them in between. So I'm sort of in between here right now. Is there any way a rezoning could go through before that period of time? Or are we, like, what's the difference, how long would that take if we went after it?
Well, it could fail, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
So our
Ultimately could fail.
Yeah.
I mean, our website says the rezoning is 6 to 18 months. And I think I've only seen a 6-month one where it's like a tweak essentially to.
When you needed to move into here.
Maybe.
So if we went for a full rezoning, presumably that they would be without a space in September.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so Maureen read something that I missed, that this is a lease option to purchase type of.
So.
Or.
Yeah, I mean, the report, I wrote that, and that's incorrect. Essentially, somebody is looking to purchase the property and lease it to IDLC.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
that's different from what this
And
says.
Okay.
And lease it to IDLC.
Oh, okay, okay. So that's-
But they'll only do that if it can be rezoned, or?
As I understand it, the purchase was conditional on getting like approvals from the municipality to operate there.
That's not what I read either. Okay, good.
Okay, because I guess I was going to say, part of going through the back door and doing a temporary use permit so you can operate while you go through a rezoning doesn't seem cricket to me either. But to go through a 1-year temporary use permit, I don't know how much work they have to do on the school, on the building to use it as a school, which gives them more time to look for something, but also to see if it would work in the neighborhood. And if it does, then they could apply to go through the rezoning process, but not do the concurrence.
Back in that same position again at that point in time, Maureen.
The recommendations that we have in front of us are for giving notice
Yeah.
and consulting with the neighbors and the adjacent. And I know that IDLC has done some of its own checking out what people's responses are. I think there might be value in simply doing this, giving notice, hearing from all of the community, because if this has come up relatively recently, there may be people who are supportive, who are strongly opposed, so on, that we haven't heard from yet. And I think that would give us some, and give us and give IDLC a better sense of what we're dealing with, and give the neighborhood a better sense. It's very hard to say to a person standing in front of you, who is describing what they want to do, it's hard to say to them, no, we don't support that, although apparently a few people did.
I just like to give my 2 cents worth, because IDLC is right down by my place. I drive by there 100 times a day. It is the most benign operation you'd ever see. You know, you never see the kids outside. If they are, they're walking around the roads or something, out on a little trip, a nature trip. The parking's fine. Sometimes the parking overflows, like Allison said, on the other side of the road, but they've got that under control. It's quiet, it's benign, and I don't know what the idea is, why the neighborhood is so afraid of it. So I like to move this ahead and have some good community conversations there, and I just don't think it's as bad as everybody thinks it's gonna be. I don't have a problem, they've looked after the parking, I don't have a problem with, the parking out and dropping off and walking in. It's not that busy in there. It really isn't. House.
I don't think Gary exactly drives by there 100 times a day. We'll have to be giving him the greenhouse gas polluter.
Yeah.
You can hear the kids playing when we're out on the golf course. I mean, there is some noise of kids playing, but it's not yelling and screaming, it's fun playing noise. And drop off and pick up time can be a little bit hectic. I mean, my first reaction when I saw this application was the car traffic. Knowing, coming down, and they finally did get it sorted out, so it now works out reasonably well. But the roads down there are narrower and not as wide and not as much shoulder and pull-off area as there is where they are right now. So I think I would not, give it the notice, really sit down and talk with the neighbors about the parking and safety issue of kids walking on the roads. There's no sidewalks there, and no real shoulders to speak on, walking in there. And the backing out of driveways and stuff is with trees that you can't see what's coming. I think there's been some valid points raised. If he was going to hold a neighborhood information meeting, would staff attend?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think he should hold a neighborhood meeting. You get to go to.
Yeah, I certainly agree. We've got to get it to a broader spectrum and see what happens.
Thank you. I had that initial question, and I tend to agree with Maureen, and I'll be in support of this motion that refer it out for community consultation. Really, it's about giving, I think this is this IDLC is a wonderful part of our community, and people working together to create an educational experience that uses nature and our facilities. And I think what I hear about walking and bicycling and taking public transit, I would point out that that's the closest to a sidewalk we've got is from the bus down the sidewalk, across the causeway, up the trail. And anyway, so I would, with respect, if people are ready, I'd like to move the motions.
All right.
Okay. That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of temporary use permit TUP 02-2020 for school use by 464 Melmore Road, legally described as, Lot 20, Block 6, District Lot 490, Plan 11393, PID 009-079211, at the March 9th, 2020 meeting of council. That council authorize staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of temporary use permit TUP 02-2020 in accordance with section 494 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 464 Melmore Road, legally described as ... Do I have to read all those numbers again? No. That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DPP 03-2020 for the variance of parking requirements for 464 Melmore Road, legally described as Lot 20... at the March 9th, 2020 meeting of council. The council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of DVP 03/2020 in accordance with section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 464 Melmore Road, ...
Okay, any further discussion?
Does, if we approve this, does this now mean, just help me here in terms of actually discussing this with the neighbours? Where does this take us? If we approve this recommendation, then now where is the onus?
Takes it out to the public.
This takes it out to the public.
Well, let's let Daniel answer.
So this would mean, essentially, we would do the notice as outlined in the report, so it's advertising the paper, it's sending the notice to the mail,
Right.
things like that. If council wants the applicant to hold a meeting, then I would suggest you amend it to add the same language we did for the 720 Gardner Lane, so that council advise the applicant to host a public open house prior to
Oh, yeah.
consideration. So
Yes,
I-
I thought that was in there, sorry.
No,
Yes.
it was in his report.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
So I would add that to my motion.
Daniel, do we ever require signs when we're considering temporary permit?
We will place a sign on the site.
You will, okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay.
So we do for all the variance permits, and so I'll do one that has both, permit applications, yeah.
Well,
Do you have that other resolution?
So, that council,
Hope's got it.
advise the applicant post a public meeting, you got all that? Thank you, so that I moved that and you seconded that? Yeah.
Okay, all in favor of that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now at 8.1, which is moved to a closed meeting. Council moves to a closed meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 90-1A and K of the community charter. Personal information about an identifiable individual and negotiations or related discussion. And we,
Full disclosure, I have to say that I just winked at one of the applicants because she smiled at me and I winked. I didn't mean anything by it.
oh,
The camera's
Just-
on.
and we will recess the regular council meeting this time.
Fortunately, the camera didn't get who you were winking at, only
Yeah,
I was
let's-
winking.
you want to take 5 minutes or what?
No,
Bronwyn, you know we're going to be coming back to open meeting.
Yes.
That's what I was asking.
Just,
I don't get to go home.
just give us a couple minutes.
Yeah.
well, you could if you wanted to, but.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Night.
Such a great operation.
So now my curiosity is totally piqued, what's gonna happen to the existing house?
Priscilla?
I gotta buy it.
Well, you said change of use, so I wasn't sure it was report, okay.
I know.
It's put on the camera.
That's
Yeah, what is
11,
this, yellow?
11:21.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just in the wrong color.
Yeah.
Hang-
Oh, I just brought it, hi.
Oh, shucks.
Well, the rest of us were already here. I meant just, you were the only one that was patient enough. Wasn't being.
It smells like- You can smell people in the building?
No, it was here.
Oh,
People
okay.
in the building. I don't know where it's moving.
Upstairs maybe.
What's that?
Jennifer.
Okay, so Ellen, let's go.
Okay,
There's a house that are in.
so I don't know very much, that I need to take very much of the council's time here. All this is asking for is from Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee, the meeting that I was not at, but I did call Bonnie today and made sure that I understood it, is that park staff get permission from council to add a couple of hours to their work plan in order to, a couple times a year, monitor the culvert that goes through a driveway that feeds water from the bog, to make sure we haven't clogged it up. So, I can read it out?
Yeah.
Whereas Headwaters Bog is a rare and sensitive ecosystem on Bowen Island and a major piece of the largest contiguous park system in Bowen Island Municipality. And whereas the access road to development on the north side of Headwaters Park, Athletic Road, and its associated culverts act as a mechanism to maintain the appropriate water level of the bog. Now, and whereas beaver activity threatens the integrity of the access road, be it resolved that council directs staff to, park staff to establish regular monitoring and maintenance of the culverts associated with the bog, to ensure adequate water levels sustaining the health of the bog are maintained.
I'll second that. All in favor? Thank you.
I just have one protest question. I don't understand why this wouldn't have been a routine part of the job description.
Yeah, that's what I would have.
Roads, they have, usually it's roads crew that do this,
Yeah.
but this is about maintaining water level for the health of the bog. And roads crew don't usually pay much attention to that kind of thing. So the park staff are taking it on, it might be 2 or 3 times a year they go around.
Well, I'd still raise my question. The park staff is responsible for the well-being of the park, so why they wouldn't just go and do it anyhow? Why we needed a council resolution? I know.
I don't know the answer to that, but we've passed it, so let's move on.
Here.
Okay.
New business. Responding to Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation's expression of interest to develop affordable rental housing on municipal land. Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Gary. So I've spoken about this a few times earlier, but this now was passed by the board, so we should be getting the COI shortly. And I don't know how much I need to say, but I guess most of you are familiar with Metro Vancouver Housing. And basically what they do is they provide rental housing. Some of it was subsidized at 30% of income, and the rest is at low to moderate income. So they would be able to help with the project, but the other thing they do is they manage the project. And that's something that would be a huge advantage for us, because building will be hard enough, managing it would be even harder. And their reputation of doing that, I've actually worked with them in the past, or my staff, when I was with Metro Vancouver, worked with them on various projects where they're really very keen on sort of building community within their housing development. So what the EOI, halfway down my report, it talks about the key considerations. And the first one is development potential, the total number of units. So I went to the head of housing to ask if a smaller project like ours would be okay. She said absolutely.
Okay.
Then, livability around convenient access to community amenities and transit, it couldn't be better. We're looking at financial feasibility. Now we've agreed to very generous terms on the land. Whether there are other issues inside that, I'm not sure, but so far that's good. Regional equity, well, I just looked at their map, and there's nothing west of the Lionsgate Bridge, really, for Metro Vancouver Housing, and further east from there, actually. Nothing in West Vancouver, or on the west side of North Van.
Nothing in West Vancouver at all.
No. For Metro Vancouver Housing, no. So really, regional equity, that's sort of, we fall into that box quite nicely, I think. And then municipal action. So this is the interesting one. Actions to support the development of affordable housing, such as expedited approval processes, parking reduction, fee waivers, grants, density bonus. So what can we do? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted it to also go to the Housing Committee and to the Mayor's Committee to what are the recommendations? How do we enhance this application? What are the things that we could actually do? And the deadline is April 1st, so we really have very little time here. It's a couple of months away. So that's, I guess that's my presentation. Any questions?
Go ahead.
Just a quick one. I sat in on a Metro meeting last year, and there was almost no money, like it was like a zero in the housing fund. So this is new. How much money is it in total?
10 million.
Yeah, it's
It's not a lot.
no, it's what they've got. I can't try to remember the numbers. They've got a 10-year plan. You should read my report, Rob. It's all in here. But it was $4 million this year. $4 million this year for deals with other municipalities, where we provide the land, somebody provides the land, and they're using that money as leverage, of course, because they would also go to the feds. It was also this morning at a meeting with Metro Vancouver directors and all of the MPs for our region, and there was quite a lot of talk about affordable housing by the federal folks and the national housing strategy and the need for more money and so on. So there would certainly be attempts to leverage the feds as well as the province to get more money to it.
So, are you thinking about is this a new project now?
This is
another project?
This is a brand new project that came out of the board workshop.
No, a new project for us, you mean?
Yes.
No, this would be working, well, we can do anything we wanted, but I'd say the Birch project.
It's going to have to be something fairly concrete.
They want, the closer it is to development. And
okay, so it would be with the current project.
It would be with.
100% agreed.
Yeah. And I think the state that we're at, where they're actually working on the design right now, is sort of right that, you know, you don't want something that's so set in concrete that, you know, there's sort of nothing to talk to Metro about, but you don't want something that's just sort of up in the air.
Yeah.
And so I think it's sort of probably at that sort of cusp that would be useful. So, oh yes, this is, and I've talked to Robin about it, and so she's very keen, because, you know, to get a few more hands to help with this project would be really great for that, for Birch.
Okay, Sue Ellen?
Yes, just with regard to what else could we do? It seems to me we did a whole bunch of things to help with Snug Cove House in terms of putting in the sewer line and waiving fees for connecting up and things like that. Maybe there's some of those.
No, we're not doing that.
Well, there were some things that we found a way.
Can't afford to do it anymore.
Maybe there will be some things that we can find.
No,
in
this
those
is,
kind of
this is
areas.
definitely, this is just the Metro money, getting some of the money out of Metro to enhance
Yep,
the
I'm just saying-
Birch's experience, as it were.
I'm just saying, I think we could probably find some things that we can check some boxes.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you read through the rest of the report, you'll actually see the application form, and it's pretty straightforward. But if we get shortlisted, then they'll come and do a detailed assessment.
Perfect.
So the goal at this point is to get shortlisted.
Yes, that's correct.
My one
Well, I'll move the
caution
recommendation.
Excuse me?
was just in terms of, so in December, if we got the initial letter from Metro Vancouver about this opportunity and some talks with the staff, is I definitely had the impression they were looking for a project that they would partner with the municipality on to do a Metro Vancouver housing
Yes, that's what
project.
with a nonprofit as well. They're very keen on nonprofit as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was not, that was not necessarily the message I got on the phone, they were looking for a project Metro Vancouver housing would develop
It would be.
and would operate.
That's correct.
Well, then that's not Birch.
But they're looking, that's part of what they're looking for is partnerships. So they'd be working with Birch in the development of it, but then they would operate it.
Yeah, that, I don't have a problem with that.
So
I don't know what happens with CMHC or.
Oh, yeah, they'd look for them as well. Yeah.
Daniel had some more to say.
Yeah.
I was just saying, we made an agreement to lease the land to Birch to operate a housing project. It's just how that would mesh with this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
Birch
would have to
might be
be.
quite happy to facilitate the building and then somebody else operate it.
I would imagine they would. Robin seemed quite keen.
Yeah.
Well, this takes us down the path, we'll find
Yeah,
out the answers.
exactly.
Yeah.
Let's give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah.
Can't lose.
Do you wanna?
I'll make the motion.
Please.
That council direct staff to facilitate the development of new affordable rental housing on the community land by working with Bowen Island Birch to expedite response to Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation's call for expressions of interest to identify potential lands owned by member jurisdictions for new affordable rental housing. And B, referring the report dated February 4th, 2020 to the Housing Advisory Committee and Mayor's Standing Committee on Community Lands for recommended actions that could strengthen the application.
Thank you, Michael, and any further discussion, all in favor?
Yep.
Thank you, that is,
Just a point on the committees, the Mayor's Standing Committee doesn't have a meeting scheduled at this
You know,
point.
we have to then do it.
no, we canceled that one, so it's gonna be early March.
Yeah, and the Housing Advisory Committee, I think, is shifting to the 19th of this month. It would be useful, I think, for Daniel to just check in and confirm that Birch isn't too complicated a partner. I know that they're looking for sort of big bundles of partners,
That's right.
but just if that was your takeaway from the conversation, I
I
just
think
like
the
to
other key is
confirm.
to make sure that we can stack on CMHC or BC Housing, whatever Birch is working with. All right, thank you, David. Metro Vancouver Director, David Hockey.
All right, that's me. A couple of things. Okay. One is, I was just at I'm also on a committee, the Indigenous Relations Committee, and produce an interesting booklet they have every year on a guide to First Nations in the region. And I've used it when I was doing work on First Nations engagement, the earlier version. So I've got a copy for everybody, and
Awesome.
Staff, so I'll just pass these around. I think I had something else I wanted to say, but I'm trying to think what the heck it was. Oh, no, it's okay. It was on the last board meeting, they passed, our a request to the Municipal Finance Authority. It went to the Metro Vancouver Board. That's a technicality that has to happen, and it did happen. So that was it.
Thank you. And I'll be brief, and Michael
Okay.
can add anything. I just wanted to mention in the Islands 2050, the forward-thinking planning and public participation is just over, so we'll get a report on that soon. Trust Council is meeting mid-March on Salt Spring Island, and that's in your agenda down there on 12.3B. And I can make our strategic plan that we adopted a few meetings, at the last meeting, available to anybody who wants it. I hope, have we put this in the agenda yet under an info item?
No, because I don't think I've received
I've
it.
seen
Okay.
But I can get it from the website, so don't worry. I'll make a note to do that.
Okay, thank you. And then I think that's all I wanted to mention.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
The Parks Committee is meeting on Wednesday, so something to report next time.
Well, thank you very much. And Allison.
Okay, I'm just looking at the agenda. Ride hailing, the intermunicipal business license, I think I talked about the last time. Yeah, there's been lots of local press on the subject. So we got an update on the Broadway subway line and sort of the support that Vancouver would provide to the project. And of course, Vancouver, UBC, and Musqueam Nation and Squamish have joined to go to the feds to raise the money to have the line extended from RV to UBC. And the other was moving forward on the business case development for the Surrey Langley SkyTrain extension. So I got some agreements on that. That was an information item as well.
Does that look like it's going SkyTrain, or is there still LRT SkyTrain, or is it going SkyTrain?
It's SkyTrain.
It is.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Allison, is that it?
I think so, there's something else I want. And a few of us went to the Local Government Leadership Academy, and I just haven't had time to dissect my notes. We had some excellent sessions on inclusivity, inclusiveness, and not just with Indigenous relations, with different genders, with accessibility for people with disabilities, and so they were very good sessions, and I think we've got a few ideas, and I actually noticed in Emma's bylaw for the province that there's a section that isn't actually gender neutral in there. So we should speak to the province about practicing what they're preaching. Yeah, so it was very, very good and very informative.
Yeah, it was good. There was some really good stuff in there. The best one I took away from it was you don't call them taxes, you call them investments.
There you go. Yeah.
People are investing in the island.
In the communities, yes,
Paying
indeed.
taxes.
Is that like that?
Back to you, Maureen, for the heritage
What are you
discussion.
choking on there?
So just a little something related to the heritage engagement that's coming up.
Your brochure is smaller than the...
I know. We went, well, this is a boat and island brochure. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Heritage Week is coming up the 17th to the 23rd, so that's next week. There are a number of activities in relation to it as well as some things that are being sponsored by the municipality. So tomorrow the Legion lunch is going to have a heritage element to it. On Saturday, the Davies Cottage Museum will be open, and then there will be a walk led by Peter Geisberg, who's on our Heritage Commission, and the Heritage co-chair, Melissa. And they'll be walking through the 10 sites that were on the proposed heritage registry that last council received. After that, there's an introduction to the public engagement for the heritage strategy. So there's going to be a little trailer from a series called Bow and Fables. Kathy Bailey from Museum and Archives will be delivering a story, and Jennifer Pierce will be introducing the online engagement platform. And then throughout the week, the municipalities' communications are going to have a heritage theme. So this is the kickoff of the next phase of development of a heritage strategic plan. And it's terrific in that Bowen Heritage, the Museum and Archives, the Arts Council, the Heritage Commission have all been involved in this and been having a bit of fun with it. We haven't had much fun right. So I would encourage you, if you have some spare time on a weekend in particular, just to drop by the Davies Orchard or the Public Lands. Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to take it to the Islands Trust on Thursday.
That's quite a day on that Saturday, isn't it?
It's going to be a good
I'm going
day.
to the puppet show for sure.
Yeah.
That's great.
Go.
Good stuff.
I'm intrigued. I'm not quite sure what that piece is going to be. Yeah.
Try to get you with that treat all the time.
Shadow
Okay,
puppets. Maybe we-
Bronwyn, have you got anything? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mail drop, Bronwyn, so it'll crop up in people's mailboxes.
Awesome. We have, well, you already know what we did this week too.
Yeah. The Undercurrent's going to have it.
We have a special edition of the Undercurrent, this heritage.
Oh, okay.
All right.
That's it. No questions? We stayed all this time. Okay. Wanted to know what happened.
Will you excuse Mr. Mayor?